Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. This week's amazing guest is Hilary Bichovsky and has a really interesting story and experience around the trans issue that we're all looking at the moment. So, first of all, let me welcome Hilary to the show.
Hi, Nick. It's really good to be here and looking forward to speaking with you.
Thank you very much for coming along. Hilary recently did a talk in Manchester City Centre, and a couple of my friends were there. And after the talk that she gave on the transgender and gender identity, they contacted me and said, Nick, this woman was great. She's got a great story here. You need to get her on your podcast. So I found her email, I emailed her, and straight away she said, yeah, she would love to. So thank you for coming on this podcast, and let's hope we have a great conversation. I think my first question is, could you tell me a little about your personal experience in this matter? I think that always helps the audience to understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And it's important to say that I'm speaking for myself and on behalf of my own personal experience. So really, this issue has come into my life three times. I'm 60 now, or thereabouts. Well, when I was 13, 14, 15, I thought I was transsexual. So that was visit one of the issue, if you like. That was back in the 1970s. Things were very different. I really kind of forgot about it then for decades. At university, I came across a book about transsexualism, which really was like a light bulb going on. The book was called The Transsexual Empire. Long story short, I wrote an article about that book. So this was critical of transsexualism. It liberated me really from it. And then I went on decades living my life, doing my thing. And then earlier this year, got cancelled in a very small way, not like you, Nick, not with your stakes or publicity, but in a small way, got cancelled kind of twice earlier this year. That's 2022. And felt really fed up with actually, as it happened, a group of straight men all telling me that the way I was speaking about this experience was inappropriate. And I'm thinking, well, hang on, who's the person who's had some experience of it here?
And can I chip in? Would I be right in saying all those men identify as feminists?
I don't know. I
You
really,
don't, right?
I don't know. No, probably. I honestly have no idea.
Right, no problem.
Maybe a couple of them would, but no, yeah, don't know. Don't know.
I always found the men who have engaged in this all self-identify as feminists, which I've always found quite strange.
It's interesting, because actually, I was going to say, I don't know about all of them. And they were the guys that we did a student magazine. So I was close friends. I was engaged to be married to one of them at one point. But the person who really was, in a sense, taking the lead on cancelling me has a trans son, quote unquote, what I would call a daughter.
Yeah,
But
so has skin in the game.
Has skin in the game, and I think he is one who would call himself a feminist. But anyway, it's a back off from far be it from me to overinterpret other people's motivations and all the rest of it. But yeah. So that was three times it came into my life, and then I thought, you know what? Why did all these guys think they can actually tell me how I can speak about this? So then I've spent a lot of this year researching, which means listening to people speaking online really a lot and reading stuff and educating myself about what the trans issue is now. And I've learned a lot. And so not only did I learn a lot, but eventually my compassion returned to me, I'm glad to say, because I started off the year very angry, and actually quite angry towards trans people, quite really anti-trans in a not in a good way, in a like, I just have had enough of this. But from listening, I reconnected with the humans who were kind of getting mashed up in all of this. And I'm glad about that for myself, But Yeah, distract myself there. Yeah, gone off on a.
No, you raise a really good point, and that's the anger we feel towards certain people and certain groups when we're told we're not allowed to talk about them, we're not allowed to disagree with them, and in fact, at some levels, they're better than you anyway. That breeds resentment. That brings forth all our negativity. And humans are capable of huge levels of negativity and evil when we want to. And it's only when we start discussing these things and start engaging with the people who we were told we're not allowed to criticize, that is then when we come to the truth. And it stops us becoming angry at those groups, because nothing good comes from that.
It doesn't, and also, it's ironic. It's ironic because, of course, this is one of the things that the more vocal parts of the trans movement will say, that they're being eradicated,
Being
that they're being
erased.
and erased
Yeah.
and eradicated. So that is also their experience. And I think a lot of us are looking from the outside thinking, really? You're being erased, and then we feel we can't speak. So it's a mirror. It's a mirror for whatever reason.
I don't think it's a mirror. I don't think they believe for a second what they say. I think they use that phrase as a weapon to beat people into submission and into silence. You're erasing me. And what that triggers in us is memories of the Holocaust. So they're basically saying you are eradicating and eliminating me off the face of the earth. They don't mean that, but they know it has connotations, and they say it to shut us up.
Well, it does. I think that's true. I think people do know it will shut people up. But I also actually think that to some degree, people are now, they're actually confusing their identification of themselves with themselves. So their verbal descriptions of themselves and all that, particularly because everything is online, really is them. And so to a degree, I think, particularly younger people, they really are experiencing that they're being eradicated if they're not being spoken about in the right way.
Oh yeah, yeah. I can definitely see that. I can definitely see that happening. I can definitely see how people get to that stage, and it's because we have now got to a stage where it's very tribal. You're on my side or you're on their side. There's no middle ground. We don't even have let's agree to disagree because we both like each other. It's now you agree with me or you're the enemy. You're evil, you're a Nazi, you're Hitler if you don't agree with me. And we're pushing ourselves further and further away from each other. And the only way we can get peace and we can live in a society is if we agree to disagree sometimes.
I couldn't agree more. There needs to be speaking and listening. I was going to say something in response to that. It's just gone out of my mind. So ask me another question.
No, and I think some of the points that the trans activist makes are perfectly correct. And if only they would live by them. And some of those points are tolerance and compassion. And if they were really tolerant and really compassionate, we'd all be getting on a lot better. But they're not tolerant, they're not compassionate. They're just words, again, they use as weapons to beat people into submission and silence.
Well, it's really strange, isn't it? What's happened with, for instance, women's spaces, which could be hospital wards or prison accommodation or whatever, and the intrusion into that. And it would be true as well to men's spaces in a different way. Is how on earth has it happened? And this is a question lots of people are asking themselves. You've got this apparent minority group who appear to have no regard whatever for the effect of their claims on other groups.
But I think that's always been the case. This didn't start with the trans movement. It started from the 60s when women said we want access to men's spaces, and they did it with cries of equality. So then they accessed men's spaces, which were always traditionally men's spaces. Then they said, we don't really like it in here. We're going to change it now to make it fit us as well. And then we also had it with race relations, where we had certain industries. I'm not saying these were right or wrong things to do. I'm just saying these things happened. We would have work-based banter, which certain ethnicities said we don't like that. We find it offensive. So that changed. This is just a continuation down this path where we we move into a space and then we change it to fit us. And the only difference with this is it's the first time this has happened, and the victims, not victims, that's a bit strong, that the people who were not privileged were men. So now it's affecting women. It's become a big deal, but it's been happening for generations. It's just the first time it's happened to women, and the fact it's happening to women mean men are genetically predisposed to protect women, and that's why men are going, we don't like this, because we don't mind what happens to us, because we just don't moan and we get on with it, and it's not fair, but we'll keep our head down. Now it's happening to women. Some men are standing up and going no, and I think that's why we're getting the publicity. And a lot of women are standing up as well. But this, again, for me, is this is a civil war in feminism, because half the women don't agree with this, and they're fighting the other half of women, and they all call themselves feminists, who agree with it and want men in their spaces. It's a very strange situation we find ourselves in.
Yeah, there's a lot in what you said there.
I threw a lot at you then. I went on a little bit of a rant then.
Hey, yeah, there's a lot there. I mean, I myself, I've never been comfortable with let's make everything two sexes, so let's break down the single sex spaces and get them all to be heterosexual in a sense, all men and women, because it's always seemed to me obvious that just for conviviality, men like to associate with men and women like to associate with women. Not talking about anything sexual there, although that may be part of it for part of those groups, but you want to have those things. And for instance, sorry, this is going to make me sound like a terrible snob, but women's football fills me with despair in the way that it's going. I was thinking, like, it's like we can't think of anything new, and we've got to, so we just replicate. Who's driving that? I don't know. I suspect business forces and whatnot are actually driving that, because football is big money. But anyway, getting back to the previous thing, you need to have, I think, you want to have single sex spaces. I was listening on your last person that you talked to, who was talking about the invasion of women into the Men in Sheds project, and I was just thinking, oh no, please, because we do need and want and enjoy separate spaces. So I can understand actually male resentment of the intrusion of women into those spaces.
This comes down to one point to me, and it's one question: are men and women different from each other? And the common sense answer is yes, they are. They may have some similarities along the way, but men and women are different biologically, emotionally, and any other way you can possibly point. So therefore, if they're different, they want different things, and they may want to be together. So I know as a man, when I'm out with my male friends, I'm a different type of Nick to when I'm out and we're all in couples. There's a different Nick who shows up at that dinner table that day. I will treat my friends a little bit more respectfully because they're with their partners than I would in the pub with just my friends. In the pub, my friends are fair game. I will rip them to pieces over anything to have a laugh, a joke, and they will be the butt of the joke. But around a dinner table with their wives, I wouldn't do that, because that's downgrading that man in front of his partner. So we all have those different roles we play. And sometimes I only want to be with my male friends, and we have a pecking order, and it can change sometimes. But other times I want to be with my wife, or I want to be in a more mixed company. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as we have those choices.
Economics has driven a lot of it, hasn't it? What comes into my mind there is Elizabeth Warren, before she became a politician. I for some reason picked up a lecture she was doing on economics, and she talked about she was talking about income levels in the US. And basically she showed that, I think if I've remembered this right, in the 1970s in America, if women had not started working, the average incomes would have gone down. So the whole myth of the American dream was based on women starting to work, and so then the households could appear to be having a rising level of income, if I've got that right. And I was like, wow, that's interesting.
I read something completely different to that.
All right.
And the premise of this was getting women into the workplace kept wages down because there was an oversupply then of labour. And in the 1960s, one man, average man working 40 hours a week, could fund a wife and 3 kids. It now takes 2 working adults to fund a family now with 3 kids. So bringing women into the workforce was only beneficial to large corporates and the business world, because we then doubled our workforce and there was no need then to increase wages at the rate of inflation, which, if you look at the maps, the graphs, it actually shows you that it never kept up with rate of inflation after that. But this is a whole discussion for another day.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm out of my depth, so I'm not going.
Let's get back into the trans discussion. So, how has this affected you in your life?
Well, I strangely, independently of having thought I was transsexual when I was a young person, later on, I began to grow a beard. This was independent. This is something that sometimes happens. And part of my particular feminism was I want to be in my life unartificial. I don't want to have to be doing extra things to prove I'm a woman. I've always thought that was a bit odd, really. So I thought it's who I am that defines woman, not the other way around, if you see what I mean. Since I am one, but so I had a gender non-conforming life in that way, because as you'll understand, there's discrimination and harassment and whatnot that comes with growing a beard if you're a woman. Because in the 1980s, I used to grow it. So I was living here in Manchester on the estate where I now live, and I used to get bullied and attacked and things like that sometimes for it. So I stopped with that. It was too difficult. I got fed up with the issue, and I had to bow and say, you need to conform, Hill, and just accept that this is the world that you live in. But it's been another part of my engaging with because that's all part of the rainbow, isn't it? And all the things they name is the gender non-conforming. That's part of it. So I have had experience of that. But the earlier this year, one of the things that happened to me was it was a conversation with a religious minister in a place where I work, who, when I went to explain to him why I wasn't going to put my pronouns on a wall chart underneath a photograph of myself, said to me, well, you just want the right to hurt people, and which was mad and hurt me, ironically. I felt very angry and upset about that. So
Did he explain how you not having your pronouns on this wall chart would hurt and affect anybody else?
No,
it was just this is it.
It was it. To be honest, I left at that point, so I don't know. I I don't know what he was going to say next. I'd reached my limit at that point. I thought it's pretty better to leave this conversation now. And to be fair, and to be honest, I didn't put my pronouns up, and that was okay. And then in the end, somebody else took their pronouns down.
Good.
So but so I've always felt connected with trans, connected with gender non-conformism, and wanted to speak out. And I also, not that, don't worry, I won't go into too many details about this, but I've had surgery in my life. I've had surgery for cancer and other things, which has given me an appreciation of some of what can happen when you go into the surgery end of things. So I had cancer of the uterus. So I had most of my reproductive system removed. And I know what effect that has. Like I say, don't worry, Nick, I won't go into details, but that has an effect on sexuality. That's okay for me. I'm 61. I've had a whole life behind me. But the thought, honestly, of what is going on for these young people, and we say we're concerned about the children. We are concerned about the children, but young people as well. It's not just children, really. It's children, and then you're going into your 20s, your early 20s. You still don't really know, I would say. I mean, obviously, it's age of majority, so you can't interfere. But don't go chopping away don't, the surgery is really is a problem. Mind you, saying that, I can hear in the back of my mind, so trans people really object to people who haven't had that surgery talking about it, if you know what I mean. Sort of like, it's not our experience. So what I'm saying is, I have had some experience of surgery. I won't specify the details, but bodies are not clay, or they're not Lego, or the way that these surgeons talk about. You cut things, they don't come back. You alter it.
You can cut something, yeah, you can take something away from a body. And well, let me be completely honest. The medical profession does not understand the working of the human body 100%. There's still lots of areas they're guessing, they've got theories on, but we're learning new stuff all the time. And when we start cutting bits off, we have no idea the repercussions of that. And just like you said then, it can affect sexual desire, libido. It might affect another organ. It might then change the hormones in the body. We don't know, and everybody's different. So doing one thing to one person doesn't mean it's going to work on the other person. But we talk about the human body sometimes as if it's a car, and we can add an accessory on it, or we can make a sunroof on it now because we fully understand it, and we don't.
We absolutely don't. And that's funny. Now, I wasn't going to say this, but you've absolutely led me to it. And this was something that I thought about mentioning at the talk, and then didn't, although I thought it'd be a good icebreaker. But basically, you may or may not know that since 2005, I think, massive more information has been made scientifically available about the structure of the clitoris. So the clitoris has a tiny part of it, which is on the surface, and big substructures, which are erectile tissue internally. Anyway, so there was some woman who was dissecting corpses in Australia or whatever, who found that. But there was a male anatomist. There was one male anatomist in the 18th century, I think, who knew this. Anyway, you can Google it, you can look it up, you can get 3D printed models, you can do all that. But my point is, what are the surgeons doing? So they're not going, when they do male to female, as far as I can see, they seem to think if they make a hole, that they've done the job. I mean, how ignorant. Anyway, they said not go into it, but you get my drift. So we're still learning about that. You see, that's all new information, and it doesn't. Yeah. Anyway,
I think a lot of surgeons have a complete disrespect to the amazingness of the human body, because the way they're treating it just shows. Have you seen a documentary called "What Is a Woman"?
Yeah.
In there, the thing that sticks in my mind when I think of that documentary now, for people who haven't watched it, go watch it. Matt Walsh, it's free, it's on YouTube, it's great. There was a gentleman who, a biological female, who's transitioned to male, and he was talking about his makeshift penis that was made from the skin of his forearm. And because his skin of his forearm has hairs on it that grow, they've used that to create this, they call it a penis. It's not a penis, but they call it a penis. But because the hairs are growing inside this penis now, continual infections that he's having to take really strong antibodies for, and one day they're not going to work, and these infections are going to kill him, and he knows that, and he's telling his story. It was horrendous.
That's that person, that woman is Scott Nugent, and he is a brilliant campaigner. His organization's called Trans Rational Education, and he's really totally going for it in the States, campaigning, getting the news out, doing videos, confronting surgeons, doing the whole thing. And I think he's really, really inspiring. He was, just switching to another theme, but which is also related, he was, before he changed sex, which when he was in his 40s or something, but before that he was in a relationship with a woman who was Roman Catholic and didn't really want to accept the fact that she was a lesbian. So she was kind of making out he was masculine to be more comfortable. But you are quite manly, you do this, you do that. And that was the beginning of a drift for him. In the end, he just thought, believing all these surgeons or whatnot, well, maybe things would be easier for me if I did that. Anyway, I don't need to tell his story because he's out there telling it himself. But he's a fantastic campaigner, as are many of the detransitioners. So that's another thing I've learned over the year, because I started off being really shocked and then ended up thinking, don't talk about these people as victims, Hill, because they're really strong, and I'm sure they're not strong all the time, but they're strong when they speak out, and we can learn a lot from them. I mean,
Let me just jump in there for people who don't know what a detransitioner is. So I only heard of this term 6 months ago, and considering, I've been quite political for many years, and I'm always online, I'm reading stuff, I'm watching YouTube videos. It came as quite a surprise to me 6 months ago when I found out there's people who transition from one sex to another, then decided they made a huge mistake, and then transitioned back to their original sex. I didn't know people like that existed. And the reason why I didn't is because those stories are never told and are never advertised. I'm sure they're out there, and they are out there online, but because of the algorithms of these social media platforms, the echo chambers, so unless you're into that, you'll never get told that. So therefore, we don't hear about the people who are saying it ruined my life transitioning. And I'm not saying that everyone who transitioned regrets it, because I'm sure lots of people don't regret it, but some people do. And those voices are just as valuable as the ones who think transitioning was a great idea. We need to hear both sides of the story.
We do. And on the one of the pictures that I sent through to you, that might show the person in the top left is a guy called Shapeshifter. He calls himself Shapeshifter. And I was just reading his story again this morning. He calls himself a gay man now, although he looks like that. He looks like a highly cosmetic woman. He's had a lot of surgery, disastrous from the point of view of what he wanted. And so he started off in a Muslim, Eastern European Muslim country, getting a lot of flack from his family because he was quote unquote feminine. He was gay. He was a shame and embarrassment to his family. Eventually, he got to go to the States. And as he describes it, he was just starting to settle into actually being gay in the States and expressing and dressing how he wanted. And he said, and then somebody asked him in one of his sessions that he went into, what are your pronouns? And so then he started off down that route, and then he started researching. So you see how this, basically, we shape our experience through the ideas that come to us. So if you saturate the space with the idea of transsexualism and transgenderism, people will reach out and grab that as a way to describe what's going on for them. And that's all. So somehow
humans are very susceptible for the planting of ideas. We know that when we interview people who have been sexually abused, especially children, there's a whole way of asking questions to children without planting the seed and without giving them the answers for that we're looking for. Because once you plant that seed, our minds are so complicated, we can then believe what we've told ourselves, and then we think it's true. Our minds are very complicated and can be easily broken.
And especially when it's something uncheckable, like your gender identity. I mean, are you sure you feel like a man ought to feel? Am I sure I feel like a woman? I've got no idea.
Especially also when it's fashionable, because all of a sudden I'm now with the in crowd. I'm also someone who doesn't want to feel special and unique. And all of a sudden there's a new craze out there where I can feel unique and special, and people will be asking me questions, and I'll be the center of attention.
Well, it'll have to peak at some point, won't it? Because if everybody's being unique and special in that way, it's not going to be so unique and special, is it?
Yeah, it's only unique and special at the beginning of it. And something you said a minute ago is quite interesting, because a lot of people don't know this. You were talking about the gentleman whose girlfriend may have, not intentionally, unintentionally, we don't know, pushed him towards transgendering. So she then wasn't a lesbian, she was then a heterosexual couple because of her religion. If you look at Iran, Iran has the second highest number of people who transition from male to female. And that's because in Iran, if you're gay, you're given a choice. We're going to stone you to death, or we're going to throw you off the nearest building. or you can become a woman. That's not much of a choice. I probably would opt for transitioning rather than be thrown off a 10-story building. So there's also a layer here of homophobia, and people need to understand that and make sure that not all of it, no, it's not a homophobic mass movement, but there is parts of it that can be deemed homophobic.
That's happened with there's this thing, I've only heard the phrase, I don't know about it in details, called forced teaming. Forced teaming. It
Oh,
means
I've not heard that.
well, I think it come from advertising world or something, but basically when they tacked the T on to the LGB, that was forced teaming. So you put all those letters together as a team, and then it's been all over the packets of Dreamies. I've noticed this summer, as I've been feeding my cat Dreamies, don't know what's in them, but anyway. And then to my horror, I see proudly supporting LGBT. It's nothing to do with anything, but it's going in every time you see it. So every time you see that packet, you're seeing LGBT, and apparently it was people knew that we know who some of the people were who worked to create international framework for transgender law and all the rest of it, but they knew that it would be useful to them to kind of piggyback on gay rights because there's a lot of sympathy, and so they've tacked it on, although it's different because of course it's not a sexual orientation issue, gender identity, it's nothing to do with it.
But it makes perfect sense if you have a new cause, because you look at the LGB community and you go, they've already done all the heavy lifting. They've already now convinced society that it's acceptable to be gay or bisexual or lesbian. So if we jump on their bandwagon, anybody who criticizes us is criticizing the LG in the B. And most people are cowards, and most people won't criticize that. We've also got the corporate supporting gays and lesbians, so we'll also be in with the corporates. It's a very clever way of using previous equality campaigns to get new messages and new in-groups so close to the finish line, even though they've just started.
Which in this country, however, is just blown up really in part of a way, which I don't know if you know about the Lesbian Gay Bisexual Alliance. So the LGB is now broken, and there's an ongoing court case. Don't know what's happening with that. That's all gone very quiet, hasn't it?
Well, it's backfired for Mermaids, hasn't it? Mermaids has brought the court case to get the LGB Alliance kicked off the Charity Commission, but because they did that, the press have now gone, who are mermaids? Let's have a look. And now it's mermaids are over and done. They just don't know they're over and done now.
There was, if for people to a good thing to watch if you want to really learn about these issues is the Lesbian Gay Bisexual Alliance conference is online, and you can go. There's one of the sessions where there's about 4 different speakers speaking. There's a guy who's a lawyer, and he calls it abuse of sympathy, I think, if that's his phrase. So for the T, first of all, everyone's trying to be accommodating. First of all, you're thinking, well, that's not how you look to me, but if you say that's really important to you, I'll do that, or I don't want to be unkind and everything like that. And then but it's just gone further and further and further. And so there are some good speeches in that conference session from the LGB conference, including a woman, for instance, who used to be, I think she used to be a CEO in the NHS for many years, really talking about how, because of the LGBT training has gone right through our institutions now. It's gone through the NHS. It's gone through, it's gone through schooling. I was shocked. I talked to somebody in the break of my talk, and she's a teaching assistant, and she said that she had gender dysphoria, and also that she was autistic. Well, whatever we think about those labels, that's what she said. And she said that at her school, for instance, there's a boy there now who she says he's definitely autistic, and now we've just all been told we've got to call him she. He's on this journey. And she said all the teachers, there's one teacher who was a guy who was in his 70s who wouldn't go along with it, but the rest of them are not discussing it. And it's so in terms of what people could do, I mean, God knows what you do about changing education. Like you say, it's a massive thing. But surely we need to get, we really need to challenge the types of materials and things that are in the schools. We need to have something which is not homophobic, but also not pushing transgenderism. Surely it couldn't be beyond us, could it, to come up with that as humans?
So that leads me to my next question. What do you think is driving all this?
Well, it's a big question, and I know I know a little bit more about it just because I've been researching it all year. And what I didn't know before I did that was that there are really wealthy individuals, as in billionaires, um, funding it. And well, let's just take one of them. Let's just take one of them to talk through one of them, which is he's a man called Martin Rothblatt. He says he's totally gender fluid now. He says it's different one week, different another. So he's not bothered what pronouns you use. He was one of a group of lawyers who met at the Hilton Hotel in Houston, Texas, for 3 or 4 years, coming up with draft legislation on transgender employment law and rights, bearing in mind he's also funding it. So in terms of a driver, that's a person, that's an individual you can point to. Like I say, it wasn't just him, there was a group of them. They were all male, late transitioning, we say transgender, whatever, lawyers. And they created this framework, and I think that it was one of the roots of there's a thing now called, there's a transgender bill of rights, and I think that this is an example of I can't remember what the name of it is, but basically you try to go ahead of the government. So if you are an organization, an NGO or whatever, get ahead there, get your policy out, get it out there, get people discussing it, and then the governments can be a step behind and they have to get on board. So there's a transgender bill of rights, and although this sounds very bizarre, I know it sounds very bizarre, but that seems to be pushing ultimately towards the eradication of biological sex, at least from the point of view of administration. I know that sounds far-fetched, but
Do you think
where they want to go.
Do you think that's their aim? What do you think their aim is? Or do you think they've not thought it through? Do you think it's just individuals who are looking for self-validation, and if you're a million billionaire, then you're getting involved in it because it's still making you feel special and it's making you self-validate how you feel inside? Or do you think there's something a little bit more sinister or shadowy in the background, or not?
Well, focusing on Martine Rothblatt particularly, that he is somebody who I might write something about one day. I can only honestly say to your question, I don't know, but I can tell you some of the things that are in the public domain and are known. I mean, and he's had a very extraordinary life. He invented satellite communications. He did 2 degrees at once, then dropped out, visited a NASA station, was inspired to invent Sirius XM, went on, created research, patented.
Very clever man, obviously.
Patented a new drug for his daughter who had an incurable disease. He had no medical background, but he did all that, patented a new drug, now has a massive business making synthetic organs for transplantation, and then does design some new aircraft in order to be able to fly these organs around. Also invented a cult called Terrasem, which was a transhuman. Anyway, you can look at, this is who this person is. Now, in terms of how much influence do they have, Nick, honestly, I don't know. But all that information is out there. And yeah, so that's a person who's pushing it. Is there something behind that person? How would I know? Can't see from where I'm sitting.
Yeah. And you just mentioned something then that a lot of people have, I would presume, have never heard of: transhumanism.
Oh yeah. Now there we go. So this was my big scoop, really. Not that I was looking for a scoop. When I started researching, But so we've all seen, haven't we? We see a lot LGBTQI or whatever they're adding to it, plus, and you ignore the plus. You just think the plus just means and or etc. So to my surprise and accidentally, I discovered that plus is a symbol for transhumanism. And
Even I didn't know that.
I've no, like I say, no one, that's my, I'm sure other people do know that, but just putting it all together. So I sent you a picture, didn't I? So you can see the transhuman organizations with the plus. And so then I started wondering, is the plus around in the environment elsewhere? And as it turns out, recently quite a lot of corporations have got a kind of a plus division. So you've got Google Plus and Visa Plus. And what does all this mean? I don't know. I'm just saying that that's happening and that's out there. So, but there's a document. I mean, there's masses of documentation on all this, but there's a document that was brought out by the UK government and the Bundeswehr working together. So if that gives you a warm feeling, as Brian Gerrish would say, but about human augmentation, which is augmentation of the military. So that's transhumanism, really, human augmentation, transhumanism. So, and if you start to look around, there are, and I know this sounds very weird, but there are, well, my online banking, I'll just say this and then I'll drop this thread. I'll let you reply. When I go to my online banking now, I notice that one of the parts of the bank is human health. And this crops up in all sorts of places.
Human health?
Human health, but human in distinction to what?
Oh, human help?
No, health.
Health?
Health, human health, or human leisure, or human. I think it asked me to specify my employment category. That's right. And so it was human health was what came up as the option. But human in distinction to what? So, but if you look around, and we have it in the government as well, there's a department for human something or other, is creeping in. So the word so yeah, in distinction to what is just the question I'm asking, and then
I know that there's a couple of things popped to my mind when you were talking, and the first one is we've got transracial now. So there's several people now who have transitioned races. There's a woman who's taken so many injections, she's now got black skin, even though she was a white European. There's a white European in London who's had surgery to make him look more Korean because he feels Korean. So we've got that. And then a couple of years, well, I don't know how many years, 5 years ago maybe, I'm a big fan of South Park. And South Park did an episode on transhumanism where one of the kids' dads transitions into a dolphin, and he goes to a football game and he criticizes the management of the football game that they're not dolphin friendly. So he makes them, from what I can remember, he makes them build a little fish tank in the stadium, so they're dolphin friendly now as well. And I was laughing at this years ago. But what you need to be careful when you laugh at South Park is they're normally 5 years ahead of the curve, and what you're laughing at then becomes reality so many years later. So for people that know, that's what transhumanism is.
And what I said at my talk, because it all gets a bit bleak and abstract and out there, doesn't it, at these points? But what I said at my talk was, look, we can't possibly, us ordinary humans, we can't compete with this level of funding in terms of the propaganda for the trans and all that. We can't. But what we can do is speak the truth to each other, which we're both trying to do. We can connect human to human. If somebody is trans and doing all that stuff, I would say try not to condemn them, whatever, step back. There's a people just, are where they are, but we just need, down here on the ground, we can keep talking the truth to each other. That's my hope.
And let me make one hopefully sensible point. There's a huge difference between a trans person and a trans activist. Most trans people just want to live the best life they can live. The trans activists are basically the nutcases who are pushing this and pushing crazier stuff. Somebody with gender dysphoria who's had to cope with not feeling right in their own body and who suffered because of it, they need help and support, and the NHS should be helping those people. I'm not saying it should be medical procedures, but they need help and support to live their best life. But the people with the blue hair and full of tattoos and piercings and are running around dressed like babies, screaming that we should be taking them seriously, they're the ones we need to be ignoring, because they call themselves trans, but they're not the same. They're not the same as people with gender dysphoria
It's
who have
very,
a
yeah.
a mental health medical condition who need help. And because we're lumping them all together, it's very unfair sometimes that we're doing this. But that's what the trans activists want us to do, because they can then point to someone with gender dysphoria and saying, "You're being mean to them," and look at them. And we're not being mean to them. We're just being mean to the trans activists who are just social justice warriors, who are slightly just lunatics.
I think that's absolutely true. There's a whole bundle of different people being lumped in here. By definition, the people who are passing, you're not aware of, by definition, because they're just operating, aren't they, in their world as men, as women. And you've just reminded me of one of the images that I sent through, which is this guy in a red dress at a demo. And actually, I've cropped off the thing, but his placard said, "NHS waiting lists are killing my trans sisters." Whatever you make of that. He's wearing a dress, but as you look at the photograph carefully, you'll see he has an erection. So I look at that and I sort of think, this is punk. This is outrage. This is shocking. This is not civil rights. This is something else, isn't it? It's a real sort of. I just looked at it and I thought, I'm not supposed to take this seriously.
Some of it's perversion. Have you heard of something called AGP? Autogynephilia. Yeah, autogynephilia. I've wrote an article on it, but I've always struggled saying it. As some of it is just a sexual perversion in men who want to have a female body, who get turned on by thinking that they've got breasts or they've got a vagina, and that other people are looking at them thinking, and it's a sexual, not all of it, but a small percentage of it is a sexual arousal. Hence why that man is holding that placard with an erection. He's getting off on it all.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
So
Have you?
No,
I was going to say, have you come across some? There's a guy, I would call him a guy in this country, Debbie Hayton. He's
yeah.
kind of changed it. He's an interesting person to listen to. He says
I'm going to try to get him on this podcast. Yeah.
Oh, are you right? Because
Yeah.
he says trans women and men face up to it, basically. But he actually talks about, however we say it, autogynephilia, philia. Let's call the whole thing off. But he talks about that because that's part of his story. So anyway, loads more we could say, Nick, but we've got to stop somewhere.
Yeah. Well, let me get to my last question. Hopefully, this one won't take long. What do you think we should be doing as individuals, as society, to combat some of this?
This might be kind of naive or utopian, but or maybe it wouldn't make the difference that I think it would. But maybe if we were all more real in our conversations, and particularly with young people, about our experiences of being men, of being women, we can cut off at the root some of this stuff about, my feelings mean that I'm not the gender that I am. Well, maybe no one's actually ever been honest about some of the difficulties of that. I mean, everybody goes up and down with it, I'd suggest, through their lives and through different days and different phases. So that would be my hope, that we could be more real, particularly with young people. But I personally think it's important not to go along with pronouns. No compelled speech, no compelled thought, I would say. And be careful. There's an anti-gay backlash as well, potentially hidden in all this. I'm not saying being gay is the most fantastic thing, but we don't want to go backwards into really shaming, and we want to somehow bring everybody in, don't we? And yeah, there was another one. I can't remember. I had 4 things. I can't remember what the last one was, but something like that.
Well, picking on something you just said about don't announce your pronouns. I was speaking to a friend of mine a few months ago who was asking for some advice. She started a new job and was asked to put pronouns in an email. It wasn't a directive, it was, this is what we do, it's up to you if you do it or not. So she did it. And then that was the first bit of conversation. The second bit of conversation, she was saying her next door neighbour, their 20-odd-year-old daughter, who she's watched grow up from a baby, is now trans, and is driving the parents crazy, and it's gone off the rails on this. And she was asking me, why's that happened and stuff like that. And I said to her, well, part of the reason is because people she knows and people she respects and people she engages with have pronouns in their emails. And that sends a message to them that all this is acceptable. So when you said to me a minute ago, you've put your pronouns in your emails because you thought it was a nice thing to do, this is the consequence of your next door neighbour. This is where it leads to, not directly, maybe through 1,000 or 1,000,000 steps, but you need to understand the consequences of not being truthful, about not speaking up, and about being slightly being a coward because you don't want to upset anybody. Because we live in a world, and I want to live in a world where the truth is always our go-to point. The truth is not always comfortable. The truth can be very upsetting and can be very damaging sometimes, but it's the truth. Life's hard. All our lives are hard sometimes. It goes up and down. And telling young people, especially young people, that life can be easy, or we don't have to be truthful and we don't have to live in reality, it's basically child abuse, because we're damaging that person for the rest of their life, and they're never going to be happy because we've never given them the tools to overcome some of life's difficulties and to be stronger and to be more resilient and to be an adult. That's what we're doing to the next generation, and we're all partly responsible for that. I think that's a great place to end it, on my little speech on my soapbox there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hilary. Thank you a lot for coming on and having that conversation. There's many things you mentioned there that I've learnt. It's made me think about some things differently, and I'll go away and think about this a lot more. And hopefully I'll have some other people on the podcast who can take this conversation into a different direction or to a different level. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your, your open conversations. And I remembered what my last thing was, which was stand your ground with love. So, and I do find that there's a quality to you, and anybody who has that quality of being able to be centered. So I'm not going to bend, but I'm not going to attack you. That's what we need.
And isn't that what good parents do to children? I'm doing this that you don't like for the benefit of you, because it's easy to give child a bar of chocolate when they want one. A loving parent will say no because it's bedtime, no because of this, no because of that. Sometimes parents do things you don't want them to do out of love.
They do, and I won't take it off here, but just to sign it up, the relationship between parents and children is also in this mix, and one of the things that the young people are protesting, and they're actually trying, no, you don't have the right to tell me what I could do with my body and all that. Anyway.
No. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nick.
And hopefully we'll speak again soon, and hopefully I'll bump into you in real life sometime.
Indeed. All right.
Thanks, Hilary. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.